Hey guys, it's Angelo, and welcome to the Blaack Rook Hold guide on Mythic Difficulty. In this guide, we'll be discussing every boss, as well as trash packs and optimal group setups you should be taking with you for the Blaack Rook Hold. We'll also discuss what every healer, DPS, and tank needs to be aware of in this dungeon, but of course without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. An ancient elven fortress, the Blaack Rook Hold is older than the War of the Ancients itself. A major location of battle of the Legion's invasion during said War of the Ancients, the Blaack Rook Hold was, and well still is, home to Alesana Ravencrest, an elven war general as well as a former mentor of Illidan Stormrage himself. A dark spell lies upon the keep, and it is our job to clear this curse up and solve the mystery. You and your group fight your way from the bottom of the hold to the very top of its spire, encountering the Amalgam of Souls, Alesana Ravencrest, Smashpipe the Hateful, and finally, Lord Alesana Ravencrest himself. Blaack Rook Hold is a very long-winded dungeon, stretching through multiple corridors to bigger halls and walkways, all the way to a spiraling staircase and its tower. The dungeon leaves little spare time in between trash packs, which gives the players the sense of constant action. Personally, your group, well that's what I think at least, should bring a mix of single target damage and proper AoE damage. Cleave damage is not overly important here, as all bosses except for the first one are purely single target, and trash packs are better killed with your simple AoE abilities. Now let's go ahead and have a look. You start off on the very bottom of the hold, fighting your way through a few small trash packs before reaching the first boss almost immediately, the Amalgam of Souls. The encounter is split into two phases. In phase 1, the boss applies a stacking debuff on the tank called Reap Soul. This inflicts 1.7 million shadow damage and increases the tank's damage taken by 100% for the next 30 seconds, and again this ability does stack your tank, so please keep this in mind and use cooldowns accordingly. From time to time, the Amalgam throws a scythe at players through an ability called Swirling Scythe, inflicting 238,000 physical damage and knocking back any player that gets hit by it. This is especially annoying for ranged DPS, as this will interrupt your casting. The last important ability in phase 1 are the Soul Echoes. These fragment a player's soul, causing them to leave behind soul echoes. These echoes will detonate after a few seconds, causing 412,000 shadow damage to all nearby players. On Mythic Difficulty, players damaged from these echoes will also flee in fear for the next 5 seconds. What's important here is clearly to keep your distance. I tried it with a DBM range of 8 yards and that seemed to work fine for me, but this may actually be different once we are live. Stage 2 of this boss gets more interesting, and a lot deadlier. The boss will begin a summoning ritual in the center of the room, where he will call for 6 souls, split up evenly around the boss. These souls tie up directly with the final ability of the Amalgam, Soul Burst. Soul Burst will inevitably inflict high damage to all players after it bursts, and will inflict more damage with every restless soul that is able to reach the boss. Your goal as a DPS is to focus down these adds as fast as possible, in order for as few of them as possible to reach the boss. There are 6 souls in total as I mentioned above, so every DPS should be able to deal with 2 souls at least. Your healer should use a cooldown here, preferably a damage reduction as well. This is the only phase that will require a lot of burst healing, so save your cooldowns for this. DPS should also use damage reduction here in order to support the healer even further, and the tank should do so of course as well. As you can see here for example, I didn't anticipate the burst well enough and actually died because I used my cooldown way too early. After this, just rinse and repeat and move on. The upcoming trash packs are again relatively easy. If need be, your group can just CC 1 or 2 mobs per pack and carry on. Be aware of some of the ad groups in the beginning of the hall in front of the next boss though, as they patrol around and should possibly be pulled separately. Once at the top of the big hall room, you'll face Alesana Ravencrest, the daughter of Lord Ravencrest. Now Alesana, just like the Amalgam of Souls right before her, has 2 phases exactly. Tanks need to be aware of her Vengeful Shear, a deadly attack that shears the target, inflicting 1.8 million physical damage and increases damage taken by 100% for 25 seconds if the target is not protected with active mitigation. This effect does stack as well tanks, please keep that in mind. Needless to say, tanks need to use their active mitigation here, similar to Kilrock Deadeye or Manaroth's mechanics in Hellfire Citadel during Warlords of Draenor, if you remember that. During this phase, she'll also use her Dark Rush ability, during which she will focus 3 players in your group and then dash towards them one after the other. After each successive dash, she will leave a trail of Felfire on that path, which connects upon again each successive dash. The best way of dealing with this is to move away from the group if you are targeted, preferably to the edges of the room, and preferably all of you who are targeted on one and the same side. This will prevent fire from lying around in the middle of the room, as you'll want to try and keeping this part free. The final ability of this phase is her Brutal Glaive, which will just do damage to a player and then bounce around to another for 30 seconds. This should be easy to heal, as it is only 154,000 initial physical damage and another 72,000 damage as a 2-second dot right after that. Should this become a problem, however, of course use your cooldowns, as they are a valid option for this phase. Phase 2 will become a little more interesting. She will spawn 1 Vanguard and 1 Arcanist while focusing players with her I-Beam. When a player is focused, her I-Beam will follow that player, damaging them if hit, and always leaving another trail of fire behind that path, which causes 180,000 fire damage every 1 second if stood within. These Risen Arcanists will cast a regular Arcane Blast, while the Vanguard will use their Bone Crushing Strike, another tank ability that does 216,000 damage and stunning all players in a cone in front of the Vanguard. This means that tanks want to turn these mobs away from their groups and soak the stun completely by themselves. This is one of the rather easy bosses if players are able to avoid the fire on the ground and spread accordingly. Healers just need to keep an eye on the tank during the Bone Crushing Strike and during each Vengeful Shear. Now, the upcoming trash will be a bit more difficult and can perhaps cause a wipe. Healers need to be sure to keep an eye on tanks during bigger pulls, as you will have to deal with a lot of bats when running up the staircase. Some of the bigger demons may also cause a bit of a problem, so be sure to coordinate crowd control effects with your group. Halfway up the staircase, you will reach a balcony. This is the location of your next boss, Smashpipe the Hateful. One of the weirdest bosses in all of the new dungeons for the first few times. Smashpipe is actually really simple if you tanks know what you're doing. From time to time, Smashpipe will do an earth-shaking stomp, stomping the ground for 500,000 physical damage and knocking all players back. More important, and a lot deadlier, however, is his hateful gaze. Smashpipe will focus a player and then charge towards them once the gaze has completed channeling. The trick here is to intercept Smashpipe's charge, as he will interrupt his charge upon the first player he comes in contact with. However, the first player that is hit will get a debuff lasting for 1 minute exactly, increasing the damage they take from another hateful charge by 300% during this time. This ability can be dealt with in 2 ways. First, you let your tank soak more than 1 charge, not using any cooldowns for the first, and then using cooldowns for the second and for the third if he chooses to do so. This ability doesn't stack, so your tank could very well just soak all of them with proper cooldown usage, but that is actually what our druid did in this footage. The second option is that your tank intercepts a charge and the melee intercepts the next. This prevents your casters and healers from being interrupted, and melees and tanks can swap around accordingly. Keep in mind that melees do want to use a little cooldown though, as the charge does, I think, a bit over 1,000,000 physical damage actually. Brutality is another one of Smashpipe's abilities. Each melee attack done by the boss grants him Brutality, proportionally to the damage he is able to inflict with each hit. Once the boss is at 100 Brutality, he will unleash a Brutal Haymaker towards his current target, which is pretty much all of the time your tank. Your tank will simply need to use a cooldown here in order to counter this attack, as it will probably come combined with an earth-shaking stomp pretty often, at least that's what happened here, as you can probably see in the footage. This Haymaker does almost 2 million physical damage, and increases the damage taken by the target by 75% for the next 15 seconds. Keep these factors in mind, and again, this boss is just rinse and repeat until he actually dies. Your last journey will be to the top of the tower, fighting just a few more trash packs before you actually reach it. Again, CC will prove useful here, as these trash packs are slightly difficult again. Finally, you will reach Lord Alesana Ravencrest himself. What's important to say here before I say anything else, my friends, save your cooldowns for Phase 2. The first phase is just a pure preparation phase, there's no need to burst a lot of damage out here. Unerring Shear is a tank ability, causing 1.2 million physical damage and causing a bleed for 34,000 damage every 2 seconds, while Whirling Blade throws a glaive at a targeted player, traveling back and forth from the position it was thrown from. It inflicts 703,000 physical damage and knocks the targets that are hit back. Latrocius, Ravencrest's advisor and greatest mage, is also part of this encounter, and he will cast Dark Blast, which inflicts 1.6 million shadow damage to all enemies in a line in front of him and knocking them back. This is important, guys, and it's also important you evade this ability as best as possible, but this gives you an insight of what is to come in Phase 2. After Ravencrest is defeated, Latrocius will take command of the encounter, and Dantalionax and Nathrazim will spawn from within Ravencrest, taking over his part of the fight. Ravencrest will now ally with you and your group, increasing your damage done, healing done, and health by 300% for the remainder of the encounter. Dantalionax will cast Stinging Swarm, which envelops the target in a swarm of stinging insects, inflicting 525,000 damage every second and has a chance to stun the target for half a second when it does deal damage. In order to remove this effect, players need to actually attack the swarm, as this will kill them and therefore removing the debuff. Cloud of Hypnosis creates a gas cloud and causes players who enter it to fall asleep. This effect can be dispelled, but it is an advantage if you just don't get caught within it. After some time, Dantalionax will now split into multiple images and cast Dark Obliteration. Similar to Dark Blast, but 5 times more lethal, the Obliteration will inflict 5.2 million shadow damage to all enemies in a line in front of each image and knocking them back. The trick here is to move as a group and stand ahead or behind each beam. This ability will run full circle around the room once before finishing, and after this, you should have the boss close to killing range, so just focus him down here and win. Important during this phase is that you use your cooldowns along with Ravencrest's buffs, or rather buff actually, and don't waste them during the first phase, as I mentioned before. All in all, the Blaack Rook Hold is an interesting and very engaging dungeon, and should be one of the first ones you do on Mythic Difficulty. With a healthy group setup, solid CC capabilities, and communication, you'll be able to take on this dungeon on a regular Mythic Difficulty as well as higher Mythic Plus levels. Thank you so much for watching, my friends. If you have enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a like, share it with your friends, or some guildmates even perhaps, or even subscribe if you'd like to see more content here on this channel. If you'd like this guide specifically, please let me know in the comments and I'll be sure to do more of these in the future, for of course dungeons and raids. Now have a good one, my friends, and I'll see you all in the next one.